welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Thursday, January 19th, 2023, and this is episode 243. I'm Carol, also known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry, and I live east of Vancouver in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada, where we are enjoying a mix of sun and cloud today. It is a welcome break after all the rain we've had, and I thought I would take advantage of the intermittent sunshine and record down here in our spare bedroom today. It has better light than my craft room at this hour, not to mention the fact that my craft room's a little bit of a disaster at the moment, requires a bit of cleanup and reorganization, so I picked the easier option. I hope you are all well, that you've had a good week. I'm here, as you will notice. I had been prepared for the possibility of doing after school care for a couple of weeks, but my daughter got notified late last week that her jury duty had been canceled. Neither of us were terribly heartbroken by the news. She's very busy in a new position at work, and while I don't mind stepping in and helping out when necessary, looking after my granddaughter, it does take up a few hours of my time each day and keeps me away from home for a few hours each day. So it is nice to be at home and be able to do all the things that I want to do. Speaking of which, it was a relatively antisocial week this past week, which gave me plenty of time to do some knitting. And boy, do I have projects to share with you. One especially I am really excited about and can't wait to show you and talk about. But before I do all that, a reminder that another year of Stash and the Yarn of the Month Club are two make-alongs that are taking place in the A Stitch in Time podcast Ravelry group. There's a link to that group down below. I hope you'll come join us. Just read the first post of each of the pertinent threads, and that'll give you all the information you need to know to participate. All right, first up, I have a finished project. This is my first finished project of 2023. They are my Victorian, what did I call them? Victorian Christmas stripy socks. So named because the main colorway in these socks is called Victorian Christmas. It is an 80-20 blend from Leo and Roxy. And then I used 3 complementary minis from Sweet Fiber. It's the Super Sweet Sock. This is raspberry, moss, and marshland. So I use those to add some stripes to coordinate with the yarn. And then of course you can see matching heels, toes, and cuffs. So this is my usual 64 stitch top down vanilla sock knit on 2mm needles. Did a 2x2 rib. I did a eye of partridge heel and gusset. Well, the gusset's not eye of partridge, but you know what I mean. And then just my usual rounded toe. So I alternated 6 rounds of the main color with 4 rounds of each colored stripe. And as I mentioned last week, I finished this raspberry stripe and I was ready for the toe, but I wanted to keep the striping going and I wanted to finish up with this dark green. And so I started the toe, worked 6 rounds of this Victorian Christmas, and then I did finish off the toe with the marshland. So let me bring that in closer so you can get a really good look at this pretty yarn. And I have enough left of the Victorian Christmas to do another pair of socks, so I'm really happy about that because I love this colorway. And I would potentially maybe add in a complementary heel. I think I have enough of the marshland to do that. Maybe even the other colors. So when I worked these, I'm showing them to you on this side because this is the, the best looking side. This is the side where all the color changes took place. And I did do a jogless join or jogless stripe technique in which you knit one round with the new color, and then on your first stitch of the next round you lift the first stitch from below, you put it on your needle, and you knit the two together. And you know, you can tell where the join is, there's no getting around that, but it's not too bad, especially after blocking. I think it softened that, but there's definitely, you know, a difference between where they joined and where they didn't, but that's okay. Nobody's going to be looking that closely at my legs. I will have pants on, so it's all well and good with me. I am going to tuck these away with my Christmas and winter socks and wear them this coming December for the first time. I actually just finished tucking all of those away this morning. I do have room to put in one more pair. I think with this pair, I think it makes, it's either 27 or 28 pairs of winter or holiday socks that I own. So I like to wear all those during December and sometimes a little bit into the beginning of January. All right, I'm gonna take one of these off the sock blocker because I do have another pair of socks to show you. I've just thrown everything back here. So there's gonna be a lot of rummaging through project bags and things today. So I have shown you this project before. The pattern is, here, why don't I just show you what I've got so far. Whoa, just dropped yarn, hang on a second. I'm just sitting on the edge of the bed, so things just have to sit in my lap. Yes, I'm using the My Cup of Tea socks pattern by Robin Lynn. And I had been calling these my Cuddle Time Cup of Tea socks because the colorway name is Cuddle Time. But then as I was writing my notes today, I was thinking, well, actually, I should probably call them my Cup of Cuddle Time Tea socks because the colorway was named for Cuddle Time tea that came with this yarn club in which I received the yarn. So this is Fiber Nymph Dye Works Mountain Tweed BFL, and it was part of the Encore Yarn and Fiber Club from January of 2022. And so we did receive some Cuddle Time tea. So yes, I've renamed my project. Not that it makes a whole lot of difference to you. I've got one sock this far along, and the other sock, actually, why don't I slide this one onto a sock blocker too, and then I can show you the front of the sock. The other sock is not quite as far along. I'm one pattern repeat ahead on the other. Let me just slip this on a sock blocker. And then you can see the front of the pattern spread out. There we go, let me. Pretty, hey? I really like these, and the back is just plain. I love this Mountain Tweed base, and I love this colorway, and I like how the pattern's giving these a little bit of a ripple on the front, even though the tweed kind of obscures the actual stitch pattern a fair bit, but that's okay. They make me happy. That's what's important. And then I did have some leftovers from a plain vanilla mini from the same yarn, and so I've used that for the heel flap and gusset, or heel flap, I guess. And that way I didn't interrupt the striping sequence on the front, which I do like to avoid most of the time if I can. Sometimes it doesn't bother me. It depends on the type of striping, and sometimes if the stripes aren't very wide, you can easily do a heel flap and gusset and pick up with a new stripe and it doesn't look too out of place. But I'm happy with how this one turned out. So again, there's a look at it from the side. Love these colors. They match my wall. Hadn't noticed that, realized that before. Not that your socks need to match your wall. Although I will say I have socks on today that match my sweatshirt, which is something I often do. Not that anyone else but me knows whether my socks match my shirt, but I do like to do that. And I've been keeping these in this bag that I made myself. It's really cute. It's got little birds, little ornaments, and then snowflakes. Tea time. And drinking Canadian breakfast tea from Granville Island Tea Company. I am almost out of it, and they didn't have any in stock when I last ordered, so I'm hoarding the last little bit of it. It'll be a little while till I order again. Okay, next project. I did not show this to you last week because I'd only done a few rows on it, but this week I've completed the striped section of the Aurora Cabin Shawl by Stephen West. Looks like this. So I am just starting this second slipped stitch section. Now I thought about listing off all the yarns I'm using. There are 6 of them. It's a 5-color shawl, but I'm using 2 different yarns for color A. But you know what? If you really want to know what they are, the project will be linked below and you can find the all the yarns listed there. There's just so many and I just don't feel like you need to hear me list them over and over. So if there's one you're particularly interested in, you'll easily find it in my project notes. So I moved my shawl onto a 40-inch circular now, so I can show this to you more easily, although you can see it is still quite bunched up. I was looking at the pattern because out of curiosity, I wanted to know how many stitches does this end up as, and it is, I think, over 1,000 stitches. Let me just see, because I think it was fairly easy to find. At least when my pattern was in order. Let me see if I can find the answer to that. It's a lot, I'll tell you that. Okay, 721 stitches, but then I think you add on for the border. Yes, 1,074 stitches before you start, or as you start the border. That's a lot of stitches. Anyway, I'll try not to think of that too much. So yeah, so this was the first section. As a reminder, I reversed color A and B for this section. There is the first slipped stitch section. Oh, so fun, so beautiful. And there's my stripes. As I mentioned, I've just started the slipped stitch section. You can see slipped stitches along there now. Now, in the pattern, Stephen West recommends carrying all the colors up the side in this slip stitch section. And I don't think I mentioned last time, I started doing that and I found it very cumbersome and I didn't like the way my border looked with all those yarns being carried up the side. And so I was breaking the yarn each time, but I kind of wove them in as I went. And once I wash and block this, I'll trim them. I just was finding, I just didn't like the way it looked. And so even though it's a lot more work in one respect, it's also, I think, looks better. So anyway, there it is. I'm not sure how much I'll get done on it before next episode, but if I do any significant knitting on it, I will show it to you then. All right, let's see. Oh yes, now a not so happy story. So I have been working on Pretty Thing by Stephanie Pearl McPhee. There's, you can see the lights shining in a bit. I'll see if this, there's a picture of it being worn. It's a beautiful, lacy, simple little neck warmer cowl. And I am knitting this for my January Yarn of the Month Club. I've had this beautiful yarn in my stash for far too long. I'm just gonna see, got the label here. It is Filatura de Crosa, Golden Line Superior. Probably can't read that too well anyway because of the light. And it is color 12. Actually, that is showing up quite well today. Very well. So you can see it's got a kind of a bit of a purple tone to this blue, and it's very, very soft and luxurious. It is a cashmere silk blend, 70% cashmere, 30% silk. And oh, it's just gorgeous. So the cowl is going very nicely. I have it actually on 2 needles at the moment because I wanted to try it on and make sure it was going to be long enough or not too, or yeah, long enough is what I was most worried about, and big enough around. And it fits perfectly as it's supposed to fit. Oh, once again, it's going to be very difficult to show you, especially against my dark sweatshirt. And you know what lace looks like when it's not blocked? It just looks like a bunch of spaghetti. Let's see if I put my hand underneath it. There, you can see the main part of it. Whoops. And then this lacy border. Did not anticipate how difficult it would be to show you, and therefore did not prepare for it. Last week I put a piece of paper underneath so you could see it. In any case, I have a bit of a dilemma. So 2 things. One is the whole idea of this Yarn of the Month Club. Whoops, I've got my needle caught here. Just a sec. One point of it is to, you know, use up yarn that you've been kind of maybe holding on to or trying to find the perfect project for. And I'm only going to use up like the smallest amount. I think right now I've only used something like 5 grams or so. like I still have all of that left. You hardly can tell a difference from when I started. I'm also a little bit concerned, well, and then it's not gonna meet the 200-yard minimum for the month, which, you know, it's my make along. I'm not winning prizes anyway, but the whole idea is to have, you know, a project that's taking at least some yarn, a significant amount of yarn. I'm also a little bit concerned that maybe it's just too fine. It's too open. On the other hand, it's very pretty. It looks very nice on. You can definitely, you know, see your skin underneath it when you wear it. It's very delicate looking. And I'm concerned about ripping this yarn back and what it will do to the yarn, because it does have quite a halo on it. I know when I've taken it back before, you definitely have to tug a little bit, and there's places where the yarn kind of, you know, snags on itself. So I don't know. And I'm doing what I normally do when I don't know what to do about something, and I've been avoiding it. But with the end of the month coming up, I kind of want to finish it up. So, and I don't want to make another one. I thought, oh, I could do this and then use the rest of the yarn for something else. But what? There aren't that many projects that just take this small amount of yarn. It's not enough for a hat. It wouldn't be practical for mitts. So I'm kind of stuck just deciding what to do with it. So here it sits. If you have any bright ideas, I'm always open to suggestions. I may not take them, but I'm always open to suggestions. So I wouldn't mind a little bit of feedback on this. I think you can see it fairly well in that shot there. It is very pretty, and it, oh, like I said, it's like a cloud. It's so soft and so light. It is beautiful. So maybe I will just finish this, and then I wonder if I held it double with a heavier yarn, if that would make a nice warm fuzzy hat. I don't know. We'll see. Up for debate. Let me see. Okay, 2 new projects. First one is I cast on a new pair of plain stockinette socks. It is from this yarn I bought back in November in Victoria. It's called, the brand is Lendenor, and it's paint sock. Let's see, is that? Now, what I find kind of interesting about it, on the label here, it says 2 identical socks. So I almost always knit my self-striping socks 2 at a time on 2 separate needles, just so I can keep the striping the same, and I'll work a little bit on one and a little bit on the other. And I expected that there'd be maybe some sort of obvious spot where one sock left off and the other one began, but not so. Regia Perfect, I should say, has like a yellow yarn that is the leader yarn. So once that ends, you know that's where the next sock begins. This one I just had to weigh and measure out. I actually had a question from someone. Maybe it would just help someone else out. I'll just take a minute, tell you how I prep for doing 2, you know, rather identical socks. So if it's all in one ball or all in one skein, I will usually first just wind the skein so it's all in one cake. And then I have my scale, I weigh how much the yarn is, and then I wind off enough of one to, and I make note of what stripe the first ball is starting with, what color. Then I wind off about half of the yarn as close as I can till I find that next spot where it starts again. And then I'll take the yarn from the first ball and kind of take it back, make sure that it's match it up to the other ball, or the, you know, where I'm kind of measured half of it off. I find the point where they're the same, I cut, and then I go and proceed to rewinding the second ball. And then when I go to cast on, I will make my slip knot in the same spot on both cakes of yarn or skeins of yarn, and I'll cast on one sock, I'll cast on the other. I'll usually do the ribbing on one, then the ribbing on the other, then I knit on one and knit on the other till they both get to where they're ready for the heel. I'll do the heel in one, the heel in the other, and then if it's a heel flap and gusset sock, then I'll do the gusset on one, gusset on the other. The whole point is I work back and forth, sort of a few stripes at a time or a few steps at a time, and then by the time I get to do the toes, they just both need toes, do the toes, and then I have a pair of socks. I find it helps me avoid second sock syndrome. Also, what I like is I can make my socks as matchy as possible. So anyway, here I'm using color 10, no fancy name for it. That's what they look like in the ball. And I have not done very much. I've just cast on, done the ribbing. I think I've done about 2 rows of stockinette on each. And now I'm ready to work on the, oops, this caught here. There you go. So now when I go to, ride in the car as a passenger or edit this episode, I can work on my plain vanilla socks. And I won't have to think about these again until it's time for the heels. And then I'll have to make a decision about what kind of heel I'm going to do and if I'm going to add any coordinating yarn for the heel, which I often do. Anyway, it's really pretty yarn. Love all the colors in it. So I was saying last week, I think, that it's often really hard for me to make a choice when it comes to casting on a new pair of socks. But I just opened up my bin of commercial sock yarn, self-striping sock yarn, and it was right on top and didn't take much thought at all. Probably partly because it's quite a new to me yarn, so it's still that new and shiny going on. And that's in this bag that I've also made myself. All right, the project that I am the most excited about. I have started a Scrappy sock yarn blanket. I've been itching to cast another one of these on for a long time. I finished my one and only Scrappy sock yarn blanket almost 5 years ago. I hadn't realized it was that long, and I've missed it. So when I got my Fiber Nymph Dye Works Holiday Countdown Collection this year, I was pretty sure I wanted to turn it into some sort of blanket. And I was really toying with the idea of somehow doing blanket squares using this pattern from Brighten Up. So this is the Brighten Up cowl by Lisa K. Ross of Paper Daisy Creations. And I thought that this center section would make a really nice blanket square. And I thought if I did all of the outer stripes in a neutral color, then I could change up the colors, you know, in the center and the next section. So I tried it, And I didn't have any just, well, I wanted to use Fiber Nymph Dye Works yarn so I could see exactly how much I would need for each section. And I didn't have any like undyed yarn, so I had some pale gray, and I just worked up this swatch from some leftover minis that I had in my stash. So I did not, I've just put the center stitches on a, what do you call it, a locking stitch marker, because I didn't want to cut any of the yarns. So this is what I came up with. And well, it's fine. I didn't love it. I thought that if I were to attach all these together, it might end up being a bit too busy, and that the colors might really compete with each other, you know, the ones that are next door. Also, kind of did the math and didn't think I would necessarily have enough yarn, although I probably, well, because of the amounts that it took for the first section, I was limited in how many blocks I could get out of each color. Yeah, it just wasn't really working out mathematically, and like I say, even though I love this idea, I didn't think it was the right idea. I think this would be better done if you used the same colors for the center and the outer in all of them. So then I think it would be more visually pleasing. But I just thought that a multicolored one would be too much. So then I started looking for ideas for blanket or Afghan squares. So of course you turn to Ravelry, or I do anyway. And I came across Stitch in Time by Kay Hopkins. Kay Hopkins from the Bakery Bears. And obviously I had looked at this pattern in the past because I had already favorited it. And it, I don't have a color picture of it, but it features squares or blocks that have 9 small mitered squares. And the idea of the blanket was there were 12 blocks, and each block you used colors that represented that month to you. And so by the end of the year you had 12 blocks done, could sew your Afghan together, and it would be kind of in a, you know, seasonal or you know, however you wanted to choose your colors. And of course you didn't have to do that. One woman had used some Advent minis and then a neutral color, and that really caught my eye, and I thought maybe that's what I'll do. So when I went to bed that night, I was pretty set that that is what I was going to do. So when I got up the next morning, I started looking at my minis and things, and then I again did some math and realized that I really wanted a blanket that was going to be larger than what my minis were going to allow for. And I also had this bright idea of using my leftover Fiber Nymph Dye Works self-striping yarns. So then I started kind of playing with them, and I had a hard time choosing like 9 that would go together in a pleasing way. There's this picture here that might give you an idea of how it looks when it's all sewn together. In any case, I just thought this is not going to work. So then I thought, well, what if I just did 4 squares per block? And my initial idea was to take 4 different skeins, 2 mini skeins, like 2 semi-solids and 2 self-striping, and put them together in a block. And again, I was having a tough time with how some of them were going together, and I wanted to choose colors that were going to match all of them. And then I thought, well, why don't I use one self-striping colorway, do 2 squares in the same colorway, and then pick a color, 2 different colors that will complement them, and do plain ones in 2 different colors. And then I thought, why don't you just do 2 solids in one color and 2 self-striping in a complementary color, and end up with something like this, which is a much simpler, less busy, less color, less potential for color clashing. And so this is what I'm going to do. I will be adding a border to this block. I have not yet decided if I'm going to do something similar here, which is a garter stitch knitted on in using a kind of like a log cabin technique. And then when you sew them all together, she cautions you to keep your inside edges half as wide as your outside edges, so that when it's all sewn together, your strips are all the same width. So there has to be some forethought into which are going to be your middle and which are going to be your outers. The other thing I thought of is crocheting around each one and doing an edging and then joining them together. I'm kind of leaning towards the log cabin, the knitted, because I think in some ways this resembles a quilt square, and so it might be kind of fun to do that. To be determined. I am ordering some undyed bounce from Fiber Nymph Dye Works. That's what base most of my yarns are. That and bedazzled. Some of my sock yarn leftovers are bedazzled. All the rest are bounce. And so I thought that would be a good idea. Stick to the same yarn base. So I can make that decision when it gets here, but I think I'm leaning towards knitting the borders. So something too with the way these are put together, I don't know if you can tell from this picture, all of the blocks in the square like this are all oriented the same direction. And there are instructions on how to pick up, in which order to knit all the blocks and how to pick them up. What I really was thinking is was thinking of putting the tips towards the middle. This is where you cast on here, you decrease all the way up to here. But I cannot find a way to do that without sewing them together. So my next best way was to do them so that all of the bottoms are attached to each other, and then I will pick up along all of the sides of each block when I do the border. I used the same cast on number that Kay suggests in her pattern. The difference that I'm doing is I am not just knitting the edges. I am doing what I did in my original sock yarn blanket, and I'm slipping the first stitch with the yarn in front, and then I take that yarn, put it to the back, and knit across the row. And it creates this really nice edge for picking up stitches. It's just, to me, it's a really nice finish. And so that's what I'm doing. I had a lot of some knitting and unknitting and reknitting last night, but this morning I finished the final block for this, or final square for this block. You can see I am going to the trouble of matching my stripes also, again, to make it less scrappy and less cluttered, or you know, I just thought it would be more pleasing to the eye if they looked the same. So luckily, because I almost always match the stripes on my socks, they're already, like all my leftovers, they're already pretty well at the same place to start again anyway. So I think that I can have enough yarn, I believe, to do, I think 48 blocks would be a decent size. I think I have enough of each of my holiday minis to do 2 blocks with each color. Now this yellow is leftovers. It's leftover from a mini that I already had. There might be some that only end up with 1 block in each color, and that's okay. And I do have enough in most of my self-striping to also do 2 blocks in each color. Now the beauty of self-striping yarn is often you can knit them up in this way and they might look different. So what I mean by that is I had initially knit one of these sections with a different order of yarn. And then I plan to do my next block and substitute orange here and then use the same yarn for the other parts. But I decided that rather than use the pink and orange and green, I thought I would start out with the turquoise, and then I've got some orange and green in there. And so I'm going to start off the orange ones, and I've already got 2 of these balls because I just wound off. I had enough. I had finished the whole square, decided I wanted to use those colors, but I wanted them in the reverse order. So I wound them off, and I wound off another length exactly the same, so I know it'll work. So my next square is going to be this orange and then this little ball out of more of the leftovers from this colorway. So I have, show you what I've got going on here. This is the bag that came with the holiday countdown collection. I have put all of my minis from that collection plus my leftovers from other minis that I have out of the bounce base in here. Then I went through my sock yarn scraps and I put all of my Fiber Nymph Dye Works self-striping in bounce and bedazzled in here. And I decided not to use any of the Mountain Tweed leftovers just because they look too different than the bounce and bedazzle do. So I've got all of those in there. And then I received this bag from a knitting friend over the holidays. And look how perfect is that for this project. And so what I've done is I've selected a few that are going to be my next blocks and I've put them in here. So this will be one that I can easily just kind of transport around. We'll have my needles. I actually, when I knit my original sock yarn Scrappy blanket, I did the whole thing on a set of double pointed needles that had little stoppers on the end. And in anticipation of doing another Scrappy blanket this year, I had ordered these straight needles from when I got my West Yorkshire Spinners yarn that I showed you last week. So these are, I think, Knit Pro Zings, 3mm. So I just wanted to have a nicer pair of needles for working this blanket. So that will stay in here. So for instance, I have this yarn coming up. That's really blowing out. So I've got this mini, like look how perfectly that will go together. And then I can also pick up, oh, I don't have it in this bag, but, oh no, maybe I do. Hang on. No, I have a purple, dark purple mini that I can pick there, or there's that turquoise color in here. So one square will be done with this yarn, one square will be done with another, or block. I keep using the word block and square interchangeably. The squares are the things I'm knitting, the little individuals. We'll call that a square. We'll call that a block. So yeah, there's the same yarn, but see how different it looks just because of the way it's wound? And so I can pick up any of these colors and use them. Another example, I have this yarn. I've got this mini that came with my Holiday Countdown collection. There's a bright pink that might also work for this one. I have my Sugar Plumbed. I knit a pair of those socks recently, so I have leftover of that. There's also a, I don't know if I put it in here. There's also, no, there's also a mini that's very similar to this color that I can also use. Woo! Well, that fell right where it was supposed to, at least right in the bag. There's this one. I could use yellow. I can use, whoops. That will complement it. So I'm just having so much fun kind of going through, matching up some colors. And I was actually thinking about it this morning. I think I would be wise to go through and lay out all of my self-striping again and match it up with the minis, and then kind of designate beforehand which minis will go with which colorways, and that way I'll make sure I have enough. If by chance I need to pick up some more minis, I'll be able to do that. But I'd like to obviously use what I have. I also know I have in my sock yarn that's been put into bags to open this year. I know I have the, I think it's the Ruby Throated Hummingbird colorway, and it has 2 minis with it, so that will be perfect for a blanket square also. And then I've just tucked this big Ziploc in there, and then as I go and have done, you know, pulled off enough yarn for 2 blocks out of each of these self-striping, then I can just keep them separate, and these can eventually go back in my sock yarn scraps. So yeah, I mean, just how happy does this look? I'm debating on names for this project. I've come up with Blanket of Cheer. Not only because it just makes me happy to knit, but also because a lot of the colors that came with the Holiday Countdown collection are nice and bright and cheerful colors. So I think that's what I'm going to call this project. And then this is going to be my first thing in the morning project. Each of these takes somewhere around an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much I get interrupted while I'm working on it. And it's doesn't take a lot of thinking, so it's perfect for, you know, as I'm drinking my first cup or 2 of tea in the morning. So I don't know, especially, I can probably knock out 1 a week without the border. Whether or not I can add the border to it too, that's probably asking a bit much. But if I average approximately 1 a week, I could see this done by the end of the year. But I know myself well enough to know that chances are I won't stick to it. These kind of blankets, they tend to keep your interest for a while and then it fades for a while. But for now, I'm enjoying it immensely and can definitely you know, see for the next little while anyway, turning these out on a regular basis. So I probably will just show you whenever I have a new one done. I'm not gonna show you in progress blocks, you know, every week or anything, but when I have one kind of to this stage, I'll share it with you. All right, that is it for projects. Just gonna take a sip of tea. I've been doing a lot of talking. So much so that my tea is now lukewarm. So last week I showed you that I was putting together this puzzle and that I was going to, here I'll bring it up close so you can see the scenes. So I was putting this together, and then my idea was to break it apart into, well, my plan was to put it into 25 separate groups because it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. Put 40 pieces in each group and then give it to my mom to do over Advent. This is not my idea. There are such things as Advent puzzles, and then Amy Beth of the Fat Squirrel Speaks podcast a couple of episodes ago was demonstrating how you could do one, you know, make your own, which is what gave me the idea. So full credit goes to her for sparking the interest. So I did finish this puzzle up this week, and then last night, or yesterday afternoon more accurately, I was able to fit the 40 pieces into each of these drawers from this old David's Tea Advent calendar. So as I mentioned, you know, 25 times 40 is 1,000. And so this has 25 drawers because the middle one doesn't have a number on it. Whoops, it doesn't want to stay open. So I wrote open me first on here. It turned out this puzzle did not have 1,000 pieces. It had 24 times 40 plus an extra, I think, 8 pieces, something like that. So it was what, 30 something less pieces than 1,000. So false advertising. But what I did in this little open me first thing, I wrote a little note about how this will work. So letting her know that each day contains about 40 pieces, that each section, all of the 40 pieces are all from one section of the puzzle, and each subsequent day is an adjacent section. So she's always going to be building on something she did the day before or the day before that. And then also I let her know that if she flipped the drawers around, they also form a puzzle when it's all finished. So I think it'll be kind of fun. And what I did as much as possible is I tried to take pieces that were gonna form a picture as much as I could. So for instance, day one started here. And so when she puts it together, she'll have the first duck. The next day, she'll have, I think, the second duck. Then I think I went over here. And then as it got wider, I would take sections across or else sections going this way, depending on what things were in it. Like there's these deer here, so I made sure they were all in a section. The boat is all in one section. This duck is all in one section. There's a bear up here. So just so that as she's putting it together, you know, all those pieces are all in one place. I don't want it to be super hard, but you know, I didn't want to just randomly take the pieces. And I didn't number them. That's one thing Amy Beth was doing. She was just turning her puzzle over, taking a group of pieces and just numbering them. Where I decided if I put them into each drawer as I took them off the puzzle, I didn't really need to number them. And then that way, if once she finishes the puzzle, if she just wants to throw all the puzzle pieces back in the original box and maybe bring it to the cabin or something, then, you know, they're not all numbered. Nobody's will, you know, that would make it really easy for someone to put together again. But I also thought maybe she would take it apart, put it back in the box, and maybe gift it to a friend for next year. I know she has some friends that do puzzles, so I'll leave that up to her. All right, life stuff. So as I mentioned, on Saturday we were going to go to our granddaughter's 8th birthday party, and it was at the skating rink. And boy, was it busy. There were 2 birthday parties taking place. So it's done during a public skate, but then you can pay to get like a room to hold your party, and you get so many skating passes, and you bring your own food and, you know, just host your party there. So it's pretty inexpensive and fun way to have a birthday party. But yeah, it was very crowded. We'd never seen it that crowded before, but it was so fun. We had a really good time. I think there were 9 kids at the party, and everyone really behaved themselves and got along and had a lot of fun. So enjoyed that. And then Sunday was pretty chill. We had done errands on Saturday already, so we really didn't have any plans for Sunday. Except, so I think it was Saturday night, we were discussing dinners, and we were looking in the freezer to see what things, you know, sort of needed to be used up. And I had a lot of pieces of beef, various cuts of steak, some really good for, you know, barbecue, others that were, you know, more of a simmering kind of steak. So I decided that I was going to do some kind of thing in the slow cooker with that for Sunday's dinner. So took them out, took upstairs to thaw. And when I got up the next morning, first thing Cameron said to me is, so we have choices for dinner. Do you want roast or the steak? And I'm like, it's too early in the morning for me to make decisions. Just literally just woke up. And then he told me while we were taking things out of the freezer and looking at them, accidentally left the roast out, and it had thawed overnight. So now we had 2 things of meat that were thawed. So I was like, okay, it's Sunday, let's do the roast. And so then our younger son, Colin, phoned, I think kind of early afternoon, to see what we were up to, and he thought he might come by for a visit. So I said, see if he wants to stay for dinner and he can make the Yorkshires. Our son makes Yorkshire pudding like nobody I've ever seen. They always turn out. He doesn't do anything special. I've watched him. He literally just stirs the stuff together, melts some butter in the pan, puts them in, and they just come up beautifully. So anyway, yeah, he wasn't going to turn that down. So we ended up with company for dinner, but it was really nice. And then actually we had the rest of it, or most of the rest of it, yesterday for dinner. And I just literally threw Yorkshires together the way I watched him do it, and guess what? Mine turned out. I'm always trying new things, and I've had such poor luck where these literally just came out beautifully. So I have a little bit left over for lunch today. We got back to curling on, hang on, I've got notes. Oh yeah, okay. We went back to curling on Monday for the first time since before Christmas. And I was worried that I was going to be super rusty, but actually I wasn't. And we all really played well as a team. maybe partly because that week prior there had, well, and actually it had ended the day before we curled. There was the, pardon me, the British Columbia play downs for the men's and women's national teams to go to the national, not for the national teams, for the provincial teams that are going to the national championships. So they were at our club, so they had an ice maker come in, and it's better ice than what we normally have. So maybe it was just partly just good ice. But anyway, we played well and we won the game handily. So that was a nice way to start things off for the year. And then I'm going to be doing a lot of curling this coming weekend because I'm going to be in a ladies bonspiel. So I'll be curling with the two women that we normally curl with on Monday nights, and then we have another woman joining us. She also curls Monday nights on a different team, but the rest of her team wasn't interested, so she's curling with us. So it starts Friday night. Our first game is at 7:30, and there's a pasta dinner beforehand. Our first game Saturday is 9 o'clock, and then we either play at noon or 3, depending on whether we win or lose, and I don't know which is which. We have a dinner that night, and then we may be curling again that evening, and then we'll be playing again Sunday morning, I believe. And I guess we just have to see where it goes from there. I don't expect to do really well, but you never know. If we are in fine form, who knows how well we can do. It'll be fun anyway. I've only done 2 bonspiels before, both with Cameron. The last one was just before we shut down for COVID, and we actually curled really well in that one, went pretty far. So you never know. Let me just look at my notes here. So I'm just trying to decide which one to say. Okay, something that's up and coming for us is that we've talked about it for a number of years and have been saving up, and this year we are renovating our kitchen, or rather we're getting someone to renovate it for us. We've been in this house for over 33 years now, and we've done some cosmetic things in the kitchen, but we've never done anything significant. I think we changed the countertop once. The cabinets are still the same old ones we've had the whole time. They're starting, they're starting to look their age, some more than others. They're not very efficient. We have some really deep cupboards and things just get buried back there. So what we're really looking forward to doing is having someone come in with a fresh eye, give us some ideas of how we might change at least part of the layout. And I know there are lots of handy dandy things for cupboards these days, to a lot of drawers, a lot of slide outs, a lot of dividers, things that just make things way more efficient. And we'll be changing it up. We'll probably go to white cupboards. Right now ours are like a medium wood, like an oak stain. They're like an oak. They used to call it Western oak, so kind of a medium brown wood. So even just changing to white cabinets will make a huge difference. So yeah, I have to say I'm kind of nervous about it, but also excited. I'm dreading the whole mess that comes with a renovation and the inconvenience, but I'm really looking forward to a new kitchen and much more efficient kitchen with hopefully more counter space. We are looking at closing in. We have a sliding door and a regular door to our deck. Like they're on the same wall, literally, I don't know, 4 feet apart or something. So we're looking at closing in the regular door and extending our countertop and cupboards there. We've never had a dishwasher before. We're going to put a dishwasher in. So just lots of changes. So yeah, I'm dreading the process, but excited about the changes. Also dreading the estimates. We have 2 different companies coming on Monday. Cameron's taking the day off. We got someone coming in the morning and then someone in the afternoon. And then we'll have a better idea of if our budget is reasonable. I feel like anything is, if you know, it just might affect some of the choices of what we do. But you know, this is what we have for it and we'll make it work. And I know that those kinds of companies make it work for you. So yeah, kind of dreading it. So next week, just because I know I'm not going to get a lot of projects done over the weekend, and then Monday's going to be basically a write-off. I don't anticipate having a whole lot to show you next week anyway. Monday being tied up with that kind of makes it then a short week. So I've just decided that I am not going to do an episode next week, but if all goes well, I'll be back the following week. So I think that would be the, let's see, 20, yeah, it will be into February then. So if you are participating in, well, I guess it's just if you participated in the December sock yarn club, then you will want to make sure that you post your finished project by the end of January. Other than that, oh, and if you want to participate in the Yarn of the Month Club, you need to begin and post a starting post for the Yarn of the Month Club for January. Other than that, I don't think there's any real deadlines you need to worry about. Okay, that brings us to something good. And you might guess my something good this week is Scrappy blankets. I have only made one before, but I enjoyed it so much. So I brought my original one here to show you. I cast this on 8 years ago in January of 2015. It is entirely sock yarn scraps. It took me 3 years to make. I finished it February of 2018. And you know, I am not one that generally likes repetition. Other than my plain vanilla socks, I don't really make, oh, and I guess my felted clogs, which I make out of more of a want to wear or give them than a love of making them. I don't normally do lots of projects over and over again, and I thought I might get bored with this, but I so did not get bored. I loved every, I got realized it's upside down. I loved every stitch of this blanket. So this was my very first square. It's kind of bottom center, and I built out from there. I also decided that I wanted to have, because I had all my blocks or squares going this way, which would have given me a zigzag edge, and I decided I wanted it filled in. So I devised a way to fill in along the edges, which I have full instructions for on my project page. And then I also devised a way to fill in the corners, which I also have written up in case you're interested. And this was the, I think one of the original Scrappy blankets out there. Was it Shelley Wong? Yang? I can't remember. There's a link to it on my project page anyway. I'll put it around here. I should give her full credit because, you know, I followed a lot of her instructions. I did do everything exactly the same, but more or less. So my rule for this was that every color was allowed, but what I would try and do is make it so that, let me see if I can find a really good example. Here's a good example. My rule was that with each square, the 4 colors around it had to complement it. So there's a good look too. So I've picked up the orange and the green from this square, surrounded it. Here's another example. This one has purple and green and orange, so then the ones around it complemented it. So even though overall it's like got every color of the rainbow in here, at least the squares that are bordering each other, you know, have some cohesion. This is big enough to cover the top of our queen size mattress, and it's super warm and cozy. Has gotten a lot of use over the years. So if you have not ever made one of these, try a square or two, and you might be surprised to find that it is your cup of tea, even if you don't think it would be. I was not prepared for how much I loved making this. Took me a long time. I ignored it for long stretches of time, but so happy I made it. It's just the perfect kind of project for when you just need to knit something and not think a lot and just enjoy watching all the different yarns knit up. One thing I really like about it is that you can take, you know, some of these variegated yarns and see it knit up in a whole different way than they do in like a pair of socks. Plus, it's a great way to use up your yarn scraps, of course, and also just to revisit some of your favorite yarns that you know you've used for socks in the past. It's a way of just using them over again and thinking about some of your favorite projects. So highly recommend. All right, I am gonna go have some lunch and get this episode up and running, and then I've got some housework I want to do between the rest of today and tomorrow, because I know that I'm going to be busy all weekend, and if I've got this first person coming over Monday at 10 o'clock, I want to make sure my house looks half decent. So yeah, time to get rid of a few dust bunnies and tidy things up a little bit. So that's the plan for the next couple of days. So have yourselves a good 2 weeks. Wish me luck on the weekend, and I'll see you again with a new episode somewhere in the first week of February. So take care until then. Bye.